If you've been watching the channel, you know that I have this 2014 Honda Accord LX that I already installed an AFE short ram intake. And ever since installing it and making the video on it, people have been commenting on how I created a heat soak and I'm losing power. Now, I did mention in that video that I got it mainly for the sound and not performance, but DC Sports had their cold air intake on end of summer sale and it was too good for me to pass up. So I decided to pick it up and install it to see if there is a temperature difference and then also hopefully benefit from some performance due to that temperature difference. As for installation of the cold air, since I already have an aftermarket intake, it's pretty simple, but honestly it would be very simple with the stock intake as well. With my intake setup currently, all I had to do was undo the coupler, remove one of the hoses, and unplug the sensor to get that pipe removed. Now, I also did change out the coupler that's set at the throttle body to connect the intake, mainly because the AFE one was actually smaller than the DC Sports, since the DC Sports pipe is actually bigger compared to the AFE. Once that was done, we transferred over the mass airflow sensor to the new upper pipe. Now, the sensor on the DC Sports intake does sit the opposite direction, which is fine. There's still plenty of cable to connect the sensor properly. We also had to remove the heat shield that came with the AFE intake because it was not going to work with the new DC Sports cold air. I was hoping it would because I did actually want to keep it, but when we tried everything out, it wasn't going to work. I also did utilize the new oscillator mount for the intake. I removed the AFE one and put in the DC Sports. Now, I do want to mention I do have a throttle body spacer, so with that there was some issues with how the AFE sat on that mount. And for the AFE, I did have to actually cut the end by the throttle body a little bit off to match out with the mount. With this DC Sports intake, I did get lucky that we were able to connect the pipe without having to cut it at all, which was great. Now, it didn't sit 100% perfect, but it was still good enough. And then we finished up by tightening one part of the mid coupler before focusing on the bottom pipe. Now, with installing the bottom pipe, you do have to remove the Wheelwell lining to get to the bottom box of the stock intake. Now, you leave that here with the AFE intake, but with the cold air, you do have to remove this giant box out of here to fit the lower part of the cold air. Now, the most annoying part is honestly just having to remove the lining. Once the lining was out of the way, I focused on removing the top upper bolt that was holding that bottom box in. Now, I knew there was a secondary mounting bolt just like the first one I removed somewhere on the bottom, but I couldn't see it. Because I couldn't see it, I thought I had to remove the bottom lining of the car to get to the bolt so we could remove the bottom box. After removing the bottom lining, we still couldn't see the bolt, and then we forced the neck of the bottom box away, realizing that the bolt and isolator that were holding it in were capable of sliding off the box instead of removing the bolt. You could just pull on the box very firmly towards the back of the car to remove it. Now that the bottom box was removed, we started focusing on installing the bottom pipe of the cold air intake. We routed the pipe from the bottom up to the top pipe, started adjusting the pipes to fit where the mounting bolt and isolator would fit to hold the bottom pipe to the vehicle. At first I thought it was going to be too close to the fog light, but then after some adjusting, we realized that it was going to be pretty close, but it would not be touching. There would be actually just plenty of clearance. And once that was done, we tightened everything up, plugged in the hose and sensor just to make sure everything was completed fully and correctly. We did utilize a new hose for the upper pipe that came with DC Sports, and honestly, I'm very pleased with it because it is a silicone hose compared to a normal hose, which I like better. Now let's get into the whole point of this video, which is the temperatures. I focused everything on what my car showed as ambient temperature and what my K-tuner showed for intake air temps. As you can see in this clip, outside it's 68 degrees. I'm going about 40 miles per hour, and the car has about an 82 degree intake Fahrenheit. At a little faster speeds, at 80 miles per hour, same temperature outside 68 degrees, the car is showing a slightly lower temperature at 75 degrees, which is about a 7 degrees difference at higher speeds, 12 degrees difference at lower speeds. Now where it gets very interesting is going to be the idling. Now as you can see in this clip, I am sitting at an autocross, idling 82 degrees outside ambient temperature, intake temps 125 degrees Fahrenheit, which is massive. And as you can see here, we're at 60 degree ambient temperature outside, and this is after an autocross day idling. We're at 107 degrees intake air temps, which again, very massive difference at idling, which is where the argument for heat soak comes in. Now for the cold air intake, there is some differences for driving. As you can see here, we're dealing with a 65 degree ambient temperature and about 71 driving temperature for the intake air temps. And in this clip, 75 degrees versus 80. So there is a slight difference when it comes to actual driving compared to the short ram. Now the idle is where it gets crazy. You're looking at 64 degrees ambient and a 75 degrees intake air temp for idle, which is massive. Now I don't know what the stock intake does. I never had a K-tuner to be able to measure or see the difference, but when talking about short ram and cold air, clearly there's going to be a significant difference, mainly in the idling department, which is where the heat soak part comes in. Which one would I recommend? Obviously the cold air. People have concerns about cold airs sucking in water and destroying the engine to that, but if you're going to worry about that, then you should modify your car, period. I'm very well aware of the risks when modifying, and so I'm still going to go with it, and I definitely would recommend, if you have the money, to go with the cold air. Now for fun, I wanted to see if there was any kind of weight savings when doing an intake, and what I did here is I did the bottom box for weight, which was 4.2, and then I utilized the AFE pipe and cone filter, which was 2.1. So there was a 2 pound saving, and I would assume even for the upper part there's a 2 pound saving, even though I never measured that. So you are also saving some weight on the front end of these cars, which is where a lot of it is. And that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed. See you in the next one.